it's ignored, right?
And I think to your...
Yeah,
Oh, sorry. No, go ahead, finish that. My apologies.
no, go for it.
Well, no, I think to your point is that we've seen that affect politics in the last, oh geez, how my brain, I guess, was how long ago was 2016? 6 years? Like the rise of Donald Trump is
Yeah,
like, it's to your point, it's the loudest person in the room.
yeah,
And it's like how populism can get out of control and how the majority can become clouded.
yeah. And I think it works both ways, right?
Oh,
Because even prior
100%
to
works.
that, it was
100% works both
Obama,
ways. The Obama
right?
fever too. It's like, Obama's going to
Yeah,
change it. I'm like, they're still blowing up schools with drones. So like, I don't know what you
yeah.
expected to change.
Yeah,
Like,
what did you think? Yeah,
Tupac warned us we weren't ready to see a black president.
yeah, yeah. And it wasn't the hologram.
Yeah, it should have been him.
Yeah, yeah. But it is it's so true, right? I'm glad you brought that up. That idea of the rise of populism, um, and how again it comes back to that stuff that we talked about earlier with politics and that
We
these
actually touched on it
politicians that
a
are
lot
running.
earlier that, yeah, like even here in Canada, where
Mhm.
JT came out in his first election campaign with the
JT.
platform of running legalized pot, and yeah, highest youth voter turnout in history,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that is
Which
just populism working.
which I hate to say this, but if you haven't realized already, whether cannabis is legal or not really has a very small portion to play in how we run societies and
Societies,
government
correct?
and all
Yeah,
that stuff, right? It
especially
really,
here. Yeah,
yeah.
or
Like
even before
obviously,
cannabis was legalized in Canada, it was very hard. Like it was not very. It wasn't prosecuted the way it was in the States. Let's put it
yeah,
that
it's
way.
definitely not prosecuted
Yeah,
the same way
cops
as
didn't go
states
out
or
looking for
yeah,
it.
or other parts, other countries in the world. Um,
Yeah,
but like really, unless you're kind of looking at it from a justice perspective and things like that, um, it's a small portion of how our society works, right? Like,
yeah.
yes, obviously, it would be great to get those people out of the prison system because then that's money that we're not spending. Or
But
it's great
it's
to
it wasn't
decriminalize or legalize
the shouldn't have
because
been the forefront issue of the election.
exactly,
We live in a
right?
world with the amount of poverty and climate change, and
Yeah,
yes, there should have been a few more issues that should have been the driving factor of why people were elected.
yeah, for
And
sure, and
not to his detriment, he played his cards perfectly right.
100% smart move. As if
Yeah,
you're a politician out there,
this is
picking
where the onus
things,
comes back on the individual again.
yeah, picking things that are going to allow people to like you is the way to run your platform at the end of the day. And that
Yeah,
we said it right in the beginning of this episode. It's about saying what people want to hear rather than what they need to hear.
yeah.
Um, and I'm not trying to undermine. It, Trudeau had some other policies and stuff like that, but for the most part, that's how he won
And that's
the election.
unfortunately, and for most voting Canadians, that was the only thing that drew their attention.
Correct.
Which
Yeah.
is that's the real tragedy
The real tragedy.
of what
Yeah.
we've been talking about this whole time is the failure of the education system, the promotion of how capitalism has driven the focus of individualism to the point of being narcissist is okay.
Yeah. It's profitable.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And like
Yeah.
you said, it doesn't matter what side you're on. It's both sides now. It's if you have that attitude, it doesn't matter if you're left or right. That's where your votes are going to gravitate towards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
And
you
it's not the
even
right
talked about
kind of
that idea of
extreme. Yeah.
yeah, you'd even talked about earlier that idea of being able to critically think, right? And
Yes.
part of critically thinking is not going with your gut instinct always, right?
Always. It's stopping
Um
before you act
yeah,
upon it.
it
Yes.
doesn't mean that you might still come to
Yeah,
that
it
same
still could be
conclusion.
100% right, but you want to just check everything first. Like,
Exactly. Yeah.
we
Yeah,
could
it
all learn
is.
from NASA.
Yeah, there you
Or I
go,
shouldn't
right?
say NASA, but NASA employees.
Yeah. What, doing them double checking their math and stuff like that? Or
Yeah, the
what do you
guys that
mean?
keep the satellites floating.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I know exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think everybody owes those guys a beer.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go, right? Um
Yelling at my GPS. Wait, I can't read a map anymore.
yeah. Yeah.
I
Why am
used
I
to.
so dumb? Yeah.
Then you nerds made it too easy for me.
Yeah. Yep. And yeah, and it is that it's that aspect of As society gets easier, we put less emphasis on learning for ourselves, and so it makes it easier when a charismatic figure or someone who says what we want to hear allows that like process to continue, right?
Yeah.
um and it really parallels like that rise of populism and that idea of the tyranny of the majority do go hand in hand, right? It
Hmm.
You can make an argument like there's a real reason why after for some like a good chunk of the world as well as American citizens who thought Obama was the greatest thing to ever come out of
Yeah.
politics, uh, to then have Donald Trump be your president, right? That is the clear representation of
Yeah.
how people were ignored in that those his 2 terms in office, or felt like they were being
Ignored.
ignored.
Correct. Yeah. And it was that
That
much of the population that went
yeah,
into that to that far of an extreme,
yes,
because
yeah,
most of the people that voted for Trump weren't what you would consider a Trump supporter.
no, yeah,
Yeah.
or yeah,
Like,
yeah,
not the "Make
specifically the
America Great
stereotype.
Again" wearing the
Yeah,
T-shirt around the house or out of it.
yeah,
Like,
yeah. Or if you did that, you still wouldn't have been in terms of your political ideology. Maybe you don't fit the mold of the radical sides of Donald Trump.
Trump,
Maybe you're
correct.
like, okay, I believe, yeah, in tax cuts, or I believe in whatever, right? X, Y, and Z. You can kind of go down that rabbit hole yourselves.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's all a great point. Like, and like to give almost a little bit of like a Canadian context, not necessarily for the rise of populism, but you could make the same argument. Um, in our country, we're always talking about like creating pipelines and stuff like that for the oil industry. Um, Justin Trudeau has a huge, I don't know what the word I want to say is, but but he tries to present himself as a very environmentally friendly type of person, cares about global warming and all that kind of stuff. But then also wants to create pipelines
Yeah.
for our to get our oil, which obviously I'm not ignoring the economic benefits that come from that.
But
But
it's you'd think,
to
yeah, at this point, there's gotta be another way.
yeah, well, in particular, I think that it's important to look at like when it goes back to that tyranny of the majority type of situation, right?
Yeah.
If you're not looking at, for instance, let's say indigenous, um, uh, what's it called? Not values, like their what they want. What's the word? I'm blanking on words right now.
Interests?
Yeah, yes, thank you. Sure. Like if you're not looking at their interests, even though they may be considered a minority, right? If you have to take a pipeline and put it
Mhm.
right through, um, like treaty territories or
Well, and
stuff
that's the
like that.
thing, and some tribes might be advocating for it because 'cause they're gonna benefit it because it's not going through their land.
Sure.
And
Yeah. Right.
that
Yeah.
that they'll be
The
lobbying
little
the government,
politics within
"Hey,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
you owe us this pipeline, man."
Yeah. Right. The politics on on
Yeah.
all sides of it. Right.
Yep. It
Um,
gets messy.
but yeah, right. It's any of those types of things where you're like, okay, at the end of the day, is this still going to benefit everyone, or is there something holding us back? Right.
Yeah.
And that rise of populism is that the the result of the blinders of the tyranny of the
Correct.
majority.